This conference will now be recorded.
I want to say thank you very much to Eric Marandino, who's here chatting with me. Eric, usually when you and I talk, it's about jujitsu because you are a second-degree black belt under Marco Alvin, and you teach and compete, excuse me, for Team Link in Ludlow, Massachusetts. And so normally you and I would be talking about technique, we'd be talking about rule sets, those kinds of things. But now that everybody's under quarantine and doing their part to contribute to social distancing, I started to realize how amazing the people in my jujitsu community are and how much useful information individuals have that might be relevant to their experiences. So you're one of the first people that I thought of when I thought about having these kinds of conversations. You're an EMT or an emergency medical technician in Connecticut. And I thought that it would be interesting to hear from you what kinds of things you're seeing. So first of all, thanks so much for talking with me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
And then the second thing I wanted to do was just ask you real quick, what is your profession? Where do you work? And what is a typical day like, if you don't mind sharing?
Okay. Well, first I wanted to start with a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a paramedic. I'm an EMT, and I just kind of wanted to explain what the difference is between an EMT and a paramedic. So I work in Hartford, Connecticut, right in the city there, and we have two types of crews. We have ALS and BLS. BLS, basic life support, is when two EMTs are crew members. So there's certain things in our skill set that we're allowed to do. An ALS unit, advanced life support, is a paramedic and an EMT or two paramedics together. So on the BLS level, which is what I do, my current partner is an EMT. There's certain things that we can do. I can give you oxygen, I can give you aspirin, oral glucose, EpiPen, just the basics. The main difference between that and a paramedic can intubate, they can start an IV, give you fluids, they can push 40 plus different kinds of medications, they got the heart monitor, all that stuff. So that's the main difference as far as that. As far as what I do in Hartford, we're a commercial ambulance company. So the main difference between that and a town services like local services, they're going to be doing all 911 calls. They don't do what we call routine transfers. That's the foundation for what our company does to make its money. And a routine transfer is when we pick up patients from nursing homes, from private residences, people who can't sit in a wheelchair and go by a wheelchair van. They have to be in a stretcher. So that's where they send us to pick it up to take them back to different appointments that they may have, like I said, dialysis or doctor's appointments. And then mixed in between that, we do all of our 911 calls. So a typical day for us, we normally will sign on. If they have a call waiting for us, like a routine call, they'll send us to that. Or they'll have us stage in a different area in the city. They'll just tell us, and they're numbered, area 12, area 4, area 5. And we basically just go park, grab, coffee, grab breakfast, whatever we need to do, and we wait for the first call to come in. And then once we get dispatched, we go through the call. When we're done with the call, we clear, and then we wait for them to send us to the next call. So it's different every day. There's really not a lot that's routine about it because anything can pop up. We can be doing 911s all day, or we can be doing, basic doctor's appointments all day. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you. So when you are responding to 911 calls, what are the nature of those? What kinds of emergencies are you seeing?
Literally anything you can possibly think of. We go for chest pain, we go for difficulty breathing, we go for trauma, falls, car accidents, and everything in between, stub toes, bloody nose, headaches, nausea, anything you can possibly think of. The healthcare system, unfortunately, is very broken. I don't really want to get into that aspect of it here. But a lot of the calls that we get are things that most people would go to CVS, get cold medicine for. Most people would hop in their car, go to the walk-in clinic, for whatever medical problem that they have. The true emergencies, when those pop up, that unfortunately takes away from the real emergencies when we have other calls where, they shouldn't be calling 911 for. So that is a concern, and that is a big thing that we deal with every day as well.
Thanks for that. I'm muting myself when you're talking to make sure that it's clear. So it always takes me a second to unmute myself. But so like with so many other people and so many other professions, I imagine that the pandemic, the COVID-19 situation that we're all living in has changed your work. And I'm wondering what changes you've seen in the typical work day that doesn't actually exist.
That's actually a great question. There's two major things that I have seen that have changed. The first one is our call volume for 911 calls has come down drastically. I think people are scared, to go out, for one. I think people are realizing, well, maybe this isn't a real emergency. I don't really need an ambulance to come and take me to the hospital. So people are understanding, what it is and how big of a constraint that's putting on the EMS system, to call us for something that really isn't warranted for an ambulance. The second thing is when we get a call for somebody who might be suspected for COVID-19, we go through the screening process, and if there's any suspicion whatsoever that that is the case, our protocol immediately ramps up, our precautions ramp up. Our time with the patient is probably 5 times what the normal is because of all the precautions, all the notifications we have to do, and everything that's involved with that. So right now, I almost feel like it's the calm before the storm, because it has been very slow for the last couple of weeks here. If this does turn into a pandemic, like they're thinking that it possibly could, and we get overwhelmed with patients like that, that's what the concern is going to be, because our units are going to be tied up for a much longer time for each person that's involved.
Yeah, so you were saying that if there is a suspicion of COVID-19, then your protocols ramp up and that takes time, but they're of course designed to keep you safer. Can you talk a little bit more about what those protocols are?
Yes. Masks, obviously, if there's any suspicion, even with flu season, even if someone says they just have a cold or allergies or anything like that, we're still wearing masks, for normal day-to-day stuff. If there's a suspicion for COVID-19, immediately we go masks, we go goggles, we go gowns, gloves, obviously. But then our whole assessment process changes. We try to do the assessment from the door to their apartment or their house before we even walk into there, get as much information as we can. If they're still suspected for that, and if they're able to walk or walk with assistance of one of us will go in there, talk to the patient, assess them, see what needs to be done. And the other one, the partner, will go down, contact a supervisor, let them know what's going on, give them the details of the call. And then we have to get on with CMed right from the house before we even take the patient out, get in contact with the hospital, get a doctor on the line who then goes through his screening process, talks to the patient directly. He will decide, depending on how overwhelmed the hospital is, does it warrant them being transferred, or do they just self-isolate for a few more days? So, if he deems it necessary that they come to the hospital, we take them in. When we get to the hospital, they have their entire procedures there through triage, and that's a whole nother process once we get in there. The hospitals right now are sectioning off entire floors just in preparation for, anticipating that this is going to be a big deal with many more patients than we already have.
What else are you seeing in the hospital, and what kinds of conversations are you having with the doctors and nurses and the administration there?
I think the stress level with everybody across the board, everybody is pretty much on edge. None of us want to get the call that it's suspected COVID, obviously. In the hospitals, the thing about supplies running low, that's a real thing. When the number of supplies that they're using is quadrupling almost overnight, that's because every time a nurse goes into a room, they got to put glove on, they got to put gowns on, they got to put goggles on, they got to put all their protective equipment on. They come out of the room, they got to take it off, dispose of it. If they got to go back in, they have to put that stuff back on. So for one person, for one nurse, that could be dozens of times during the day. And I don't think that's, people who aren't in the healthcare field may not understand that as far as like, why is the equipment just going so fast? So that is, that. The other concern is the long hours. Most of us work 12-hour shifts. People with family, children, elderly, we're in and around this all day. A lot of people are afraid to go home after this. So that is a huge concern. The stress level, definitely, you can feel it.
And it's that you mentioned that it's kind of the calm before the storm, which is for many things, the waiting is almost as bad as what's coming, as what you're waiting for. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So you had also mentioned that calls for kind of the typical 911 things are down, which is great because it indicates that people recognize that you're going to need to be free for for what's coming down the pike. How can people keep themselves safer in their homes so that they don't need to call you for non-emergency things? How can people who are living with the elderly, people with children, what are some of the things that they can do to make sure that they don't need you right now?
It's pretty much what the media has been saying for the most part. Wash your hands. That's the big one. I still see people out wearing the mask, wearing gloves and everything like that, and they're not using them properly, unfortunately, and that's putting a strain on the supplies for everybody else. If you don't need to go out, don't go out. I see people out and about that there's no need to be going out. If you need food, obviously that's one thing. If you can get it delivered, do that. Be aware of who you're in contact with. If you go out and you're meeting 2-3 people, you may not know all the people that they've been in contact with, and then it becomes exponential after that point. There's a reason why they wanted everybody quarantined. The 2 weeks that they initially said was more of a band-aid, I think, to kind of alleviate some of the hysteria, to get, to figure out what needs to be done. But the reality is that needs to be extended much longer than 2 weeks. And I think what's going to happen is if they open up businesses and let everybody start going back too soon, it can ramp up again, and then we can have something worse than what we already have right now.
So another spike, maybe. Yeah. So you mentioned a couple things, but I'm wondering if you can share what you wish people knew from your perspective. So someone like me who doesn't, as you said, doesn't work in a hospital, is not an EMT, what are the things that you wish that people knew from your perspective about what you're experiencing and also about the pandemic in general?
Well, I think the reality, I think my job in general, I take it for granted what I do day in and day out, just for everything across the board. And talking with, friends that don't understand what I do, they're very surprised at what I do. The question I get a lot is like, they really let you drive the ambulance? Like I laugh at that because that's an actual question. Like, people don't understand what it is that we do. I think just people being more aware. They don't think it's going to happen to them. They read conflicting news reports. You shouldn't be getting your medical advice off of CNN or Fox News. If you have questions, go to a CDC website. Dr. Anthony Fauci, he's the head of infectious disease control. You can see his videos all over everywhere. He's giving the rundown of what it is, what you should be doing, what you should be looking for, and the potential for how bad it can be. I wish people understood how serious this could potentially be. That's the bottom line, because the people that are saying, well, I'm healthy and I don't have any health issues or anything like that. No, so you're probably not at much of a risk, but there are people across the board who are getting sick and dying. 40-year-olds who are in perfect health that have no other underlying issues, they're coming down with it and they're dying. So it can hit anybody, it can affect everybody, and it's affecting everybody differently. So I think that's the thing, is I just wish people would take it more serious than what they are.
And I think the challenging thing for people to grasp, myself included, is that one of the things that Dr. Fauci has said is that if we do this right, then it will feel like we overreacted, right? Like if we sequester ourselves and are able to flatten the curve, then we'll look around and go, well, we didn't really need to do that, but that just means that we were successful or more successful.
I think that is best case scenario. At the end of it, I hope everybody can look at the health industry and say, see, you guys overreacted. I hope that's what when it's all said and done, I hope that's the reaction that they can get. That's best case scenario. Anything less than that, you know, it can get very, very bad. So hopefully that's not what's going to happen.
So you mentioned Dr. Anthony Fauci, you mentioned the Centers for Disease Control. What are some other places that people can educate themselves, some places where maybe you get your information or that are trustworthy?
Okay, for me personally, I get almost daily updates from my own company. So we get different information, different protocols are getting rolled out. They keep us up to date on everything, literally daily. For the average person out there, 211, that's the number to call, and they will basically pre-screen you. If you say you're having symptoms, you're having a hard time breathing, or whatever the issue is, something that doesn't warrant a 911 call, they can point you in the right direction. You know, they can say, well, ride it out for another day, or they can tell you where the testing centers are. And we have drive-by testing centers set up at the hospitals where you just drive by in your car under a tent, and then a doctor or a nurse comes out, take your temperature, they take they screen you, they do a history. And if they suspect COVID-19, then they can set you up with a test, hospitalization, whatever you might need at that point. But like I said, the main thing is don't rely on the news channels for the information, because you can literally have two news channels on competing channels on at the same time, and you're going to get different information, different statistics, and it's almost like a political thing, unfortunately. There's a huge divide as far as that. Go to a reputable source, which would be the CDC.
Great. And the idea of the 211 call, that's great too, because then those people don't come to you, but they do get additional information that can help them figure out what their next steps might be.
Yeah.
So one of the things you indicated how people can help to continue to socially distance, and I'm wondering if there are other ways that people can be part of the solution. So for instance, you see people have sort of started cottage industries to make masks and are donating supplies and things like that. What are some ways that people who may want to take those kinds of steps can do something that's actually meaningful and helpful?
As far as that, I think it all goes back to taking ownership for your own responsibility. I think that's where everything has got to start from. Just being aware of where you are and just not being out if you don't have to be out. As far as the masks and stuff like that, I haven't really looked too much into that, again, because my job, I get provided with the stuff that I need, so I haven't really seen that side of it. But yeah, the isolation and stuff like that, I mean, be aware of where you are, and think about your loved ones, the elderly, children, everybody, as far as that goes. Like I said, it's an exponential thing. You come in contact with one person, they come in contact with one person, and it explodes from there. So
yeah, so really the main message that I'm hearing you say is pay attention to the need for social distancing. So one last question for you, which is, what have I not asked you, if anything, that you wish I had? What are other things that you think people need to know, or that I should have asked that I didn't ask you?
Well, I think this is almost a follow-up to your last question there, as far as what can people do. Obviously, like, don't physically be out and about in crowds. That's like the huge thing. Wash your hands, all that type of stuff. But a lot of it is just common sense stuff. When you're at home, try to alleviate stress. That's going to be a huge thing. So try to stay on some type of routine. If you're suddenly out of work and you're at home with all this free time, try to come up with some type of routine. Try, work on stuff you haven't done, work around the house, exercise, reach out to people. That's a huge, huge, huge one. That's one that I've been doing more recently, reaching out to friends that I haven't spoken to in, you know, a long time, just checking in to see how they're doing. And I know for me personally, when people check in just to see how I'm doing and how things are, that means a lot to me. And I know being isolated and not being able to physically be out with your friends and family, that's difficult on a lot of people. But just a simple text that can make the world of difference to a lot of people, you know. But just try to maintain your mental health. You know, I know something too is meditating. That's helped me tremendously. Talking to friends, just reaching out.
And you're more on the front lines than than I should say. So so if those things work for you, then they'll certainly be able to help me too. So thank you very much, Eric. It was I really appreciate you chatting. I think my motivation in reaching out to you in the first place was very consistent with what you just said, which is yes, we're physically isolated, but we have so many tools available to keep us connected. So let's use them, and let's connect with each other, and let's be a little bit more educated. So thanks for helping us learn a little bit about what you do and what we can do to support what you do.
Thank you.
So, all right, take care and meditate, and yeah, and I hope that the spike that you're expecting isn't nearly as big as we're worried it will be. So thanks again.
Thank you. Be safe.
Bye-bye.